Now that's real. Welcome back to Real Faith Conversations, and in this show, we try to talk about life, culture, and faith in the most genuine way possible. My name is Ryan Morris, and I am here with Colleen Tyler, a music teacher at Pope John Paul II Regional Catholic Elementary School and a parishioner here at St. Peter. I can say that now because you've registered. And she also serves at music ministry here at the 11 o'clock Mass. And today she's going to be talking about her faith journey and how music played a role in her formation. Welcome to the podcast, Colleen.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, always. I mean, we've talked about this for a little bit. I was a colleague of yours over at PJPII last year.
Yep.
And we finally got you on the show. So welcome today. Let's just dive in because we're going to be talking about your faith journey. Obviously, you're a music teacher, so music probably played a huge role in that.
Definitely.
And so how did you get involved with music, but also in the Catholic context? Let's start there.
Okay, so, well, I was born and raised Catholic. My mom's Catholic. My dad is not. They kind of compromised on how to bring me and my sister up. So the compromise was I was allowed by my father to be raised Catholic. And in return, I had to go to public school, more so because of, financial reasons. But he kind of wanted me to be exposed to different types of people, different ways of thinking and all of that.
Yeah.
So I went to CCD. I was a CCD kid at St. Thomas the Apostle in Glen Mills, all the way, first through sixth, because that's when confirmation used to be. During that time, I also was in the children's choir at St. Thomas the Apostle. I think we sang like once or twice a month or something like that. And from there, that kept my faith strong, going to church every Sunday, attending CCD every week, being in the children's choir. We practiced once a week after school, and was very consistent. And then probably like most people, when you hit high school and you kind of get more freedom and more choice to whether or not follow your family or try something else, I kind of fell off a little bit. My faith definitely waned. I would attend Mass like every so often, and things in my family got a little rough. My mom got sick, so I didn't have that person there to kind of keep me on the path and help me to get to Mass every week. And that basically got more so spaced out in college. I'd go, like the Creasters, like to call them, Easter and Christmas, but not so much outside of that. And when I graduated from college, my goal was to find a public school teaching job, but it was right around that 2008 time when everything financially got strained around our country. So a lot of music programs were cut. So I ended up subbing for a little bit. And then the following year, I tried again to get a public school teaching job. Still tough, especially in this area with so many music schools. People are concentrated in this area and don't really leave after college, even though I lived here and people traveled to here to be here. And I found a part-time job at St. Cornelius Open. I applied and went through the interview process and received the job and got started. And I felt like, okay, this is a good way to get experience for when I eventually end up in public school teaching music. And so I would continue to try to get a public school teaching job, but nothing never really worked out. And then 2 years into my time at St. Cornelius, I found another part-time teaching job at St. Simon and Jude in Westchester. And the two principals worked together to figure out my schedule so it could work for me. And then I was doing that for 2 years. And then me and my husband moved out here, Western Chester County. And I found Pope John Paul Regional School, which I didn't even know existed at the time.
Just a little country school.
Yeah, way out here. And they their music teacher was retiring, and the IHM sisters were still in the school at the time, and they were looking to replace her with a full-time music teacher. So I went and I met with Sister Ann and Sister Beverly, And it wasn't even really like an interview. They just were like telling me about the job and showing me around the school and basically treating me like I already had the job. And then we sat down and they're like, okay, we're just going to give you the job. So I guess
Yeah.
they had a good feeling since they didn't really ask.
It was the Holy
much.
Spirit.
Yeah, seriously. And I've been teaching at Pope John Paul ever since. Like I said, I'm pretty sure I started in 2015. After a while, it kind of gets muddled and mixed together. So this would be my 8th year teaching at Pope John Paul Regional School.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. What a blessing that the school has, had you as a teacher and for that many years, and also the journey you got there. I mean, you kind of, a lot of things fell in your lap. So yeah, I mean, for me in my life, when I ask God, like, what do you want me to do? A lot of times when I'm praying, I'm like, okay, show me a path. And sometimes things just happen. And a lot of times in my formation, in my life, the reason I'm even here, that happened. And it seemed like it happened with you too. Can you articulate a little more? Because you mentioned in there that there was a period where, I mean, you were the typical CCD kid, prep kid now,
Definitely.
I guess. So after confirmation, you left, you stayed for a little bit. What is that like?
I think it kind of waned away. Like it was gradual. Just, you get excited when you come up to your next sacrament. Like, I mean, and I watch the second graders now. I mean, a lot of them just went through their first reconciliation, and then it kind of like recharges you. So I would say after confirmation, I was excited because I received the Holy Spirit. And I did continue to attend fairly often. But then high school really, I think, is where it started to show, putting my priorities not always in the right place. Not that, I didn't lose faith. Like, God was always there, but I didn't feel like I had to put much effort into it. And I would put other things in front, whether it was marching band or hanging out with friends, sleepovers. It was
like the
slowly,
typical
like
priorities,
dripping down
right?
my priority list.
Yeah.
Instead of staying at the top. And then college really kind of, I don't want to say killed it, but because my faith was like, I never not believed in God, but my faith was definitely not a priority. I did keep up with service opportunities. I was in a service sorority for marching band, and we did a lot of service for the marching band, for the school community, outside of the school community. A couple of times we did even go over to, forget the name of what it was, but where it wasn't a church, but it was a building where the Catholic services would be, and we would even work on like Thanksgiving food drives there and everything like that. So the service aspect definitely stayed strong.
Yeah.
It was just the Sunday obligation just was not a priority for me at the time. And being put into a situation where I accepted a Catholic teaching job kind of really brought that back. I started to kind of more so understand why certain things were important and why we have certain traditions and ways of doing things and the catechism and everything like that. And as an adult, looking at it differently than as a kid, really figuring out what what is done and why it's done. I feel like growing up, it was a lot of, and I've talked to other people my age, so maybe it was just the time period, but it was like, we do this because we do. There was no really, we do this because, and then the reason. It was a lot of, you do it because you're supposed to. And even as a kid, that's kind of tough. Like, well, I want a reason. Like, why do we do this? Why do we do that? And to just be told because is not gonna, I don't know, keep you focused, I want to say. And finding out as an adult why, and kind of more of behind the scenes things, especially with liturgy and planning the music, really helped me sort that back out, I would say.
Yeah, it's amazing how like talents and things that we focus on bring us closer to God and the beauty around that, specifically music. I mean, I always tell kids at school and in youth ministry here, like, at some point, if you haven't already, you're going to have to ask a lot of tough questions about your own faith, because at this point, you know, it was their parents' faith, right? It was someone in their life has brought them to church or got them baptized, right? It wasn't their own yet. And so at some point, they're always going to have to make that decision. Is this mine? Do I want to learn more? Or do I want to figure out something else? And I actually encourage kids to ask these kind of questions, like, why? Why am I believing in this?
That's totally important. And my mom actually supported that. I want to say around middle school, I wanted to know what other churches were like, what other services were like. So my mom said, okay, let's go to a Presbyterian church. Let's go to a non-denominational church. I think we went to a Baptist church as well. So it was interesting to get a different perspective from they're still Christians, but it's definitely not the same. And it honestly didn't feel right for me. Even at that young age, going and, sitting through their services and seeing what was the same or similar or different, nothing felt correct fully except for the Catholic Mass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even working with some of the pastors in Coatesville here from other denominations, it's really cool to see the commonality.
Yes.
But also there are differences. And I think when we're working together in ministry, we can see the commonality more, where it's like, hey, we're all in Christ. We're doing this because of Christ. And then on another level too, I mean, we're doing something that's so countercultural here in this world that it's better to work together than to like divide and bring up those barriers. Well, on the topic of like an individual person and their faith, their discernment and their faith formation, it's important to, have your identity in your faith if that's something you want to do, right? Like, so that's what I always like to tell kids. And stepping back a little bit too, like your love for music, I mean, I guess started at a young age, you said, right? I mean,
yes.
For a lot of the time you mentioned about your grandmother,
yes,
that she saw something in you,
yes,
that others didn't.
Yes.
Can you dive into that a little bit?
Sure. So my Nana, she was definitely one of, or not, if not the most religious person in my life growing up. She was definitely a devout Catholic, attended Mass as much as she could, daily Mass, weekend Mass, and really, kind of more so pushed my parents to make sure that they were staying on top of my religious education. And she did notice that I loved to sing. There was this book that had like a little colorful keyboard. It wasn't even like a piano keyboard. It was just like buttons. I don't even know how to describe it. And you would read part of the story, and then there would be colored coded numbers, and you'd follow and play the melody. And I would be obsessed with that. And sometimes I'd just play it. And she noticed that, and she pointed that out to my parents and said she should take piano lessons. And she convinced my parents, and she offered to pay for my piano lessons when I first started. And that obviously had a big influence on me. Started out playing piano at the age of 8. Took lessons for a couple years. Started to do band in 5th grade. Played the clarinet. Focused more on the clarinet in middle school and high school. Took private clarinet lessons. And then ended up going and auditioning at various schools to get into their music education program. Started out at a school called Elizabethtown College, which is, I don't know, maybe an hour and a half from here, between Lancaster and Harrisburg. But it was too small of a program, so I ended up transferring to Westchester, and that's where I got my music degree in the fall of 2010.
Now that you're in PJP, I mean, 7 years, right? 8 years?
8, yeah, 8.
Yeah. I mean, what's it like now that you've come to terms with your own Catholic faith, and now you're ministering to other people and other kids throughout the school? What's that like?
It's eye-opening. I didn't really realize that in the beginning. Even when I switched from my 2 part-time teaching jobs to here, it was still more of like, okay, now I'm full-time and I'll get more experience, and then I'll finally get into a public school. And then as I was here, a year or two in, I would say, I start to realize that I don't want to teach in a public school. I enjoy being able to talk about my faith and explain and kind of, have conversations with the kids and not have to worry about, am I, offending anybody or stepping on anybody's toes or something that I shouldn't be. And just to be able to celebrate and go through Mass with the students is definitely one of the best parts of teaching in a Catholic school. And especially as, the person that's in charge of the music liturgy. And that took time too, to kind of figure out, okay, how do I do this? At St. Cornelius, Margie Melchior, who's still there. She's fantastic. She was their music director, and she kind of took charge because she knew, I was a brand new teacher, and she would plan all the masses, and then she'd just give me the music, and I'd teach it to the kids, and that was a nice place to start to figure out, putting the mass together, what songs work where, and which songs kind of the kids reacted to, because, to be honest, the kids usually like the more contemporary songs. Not always, but most of the time. To just see what they enjoyed and what they kind of got into was nice as a starting point. And then moving into PJPII and being on my own, which is a little scary, and kind of incorporating what Margie has shown me into how I plan here, and really sitting and not just reading through the liturgy for that day that we have Mass, but letting it sit and really thinking about it and taking the time to really put a lot of effort and emphasis into what music's chosen, and then explaining that to the kids, especially, today was the Solemnity of the Immaculate Conception, and explaining when we were preparing the songs for today's Mass, Mary is born immaculate, and what does that mean? And talking about the song Immaculate Mary and the other songs and why they're chosen for when they're chosen, really gives the kids even a deeper understanding of what they're singing and why they're singing it, not just opening the book, singing along, and not paying attention to what they're actually singing. Yeah. And just being able to be around a community that has the same thoughts and ideals and faith as me is just, it's very comforting.
Yeah. And it's a huge part of a kid's experience. Early on, every time I attend the Mass, I actually end up laughing because they're doing the hand motions like during Mass. Like, can you explain that? Because I'm actually, every single time we get to that part, I'm holding in my laugh because all these kids are doing the exact same hand motions, and I guess that's part of the way they learn the liturgy, right?
Yes, and they would tell you if you went up to them and asked them, "What are you doing? Why are you moving your hands like this?" They'll tell you, "Well, it's the sign language for the word Alleluia." So,
oh my gosh, really?
Yes.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yes, and so that I explained to them, you're not just doing some hand motion, you're speaking with your hands.
Wow.
So make sure you're pointing correctly, opening your hand up when you're supposed to, so that you're not only singing Alleluia out loud, but you're showing it. So that one they really enjoy because they get, to move, which kids need to move. And especially during a Catholic Mass, there's not a lot of movement besides standing, sitting, and kneeling. So I try to incorporate things like that as well. Clapping.
Yeah.
And just
Gloria.
Yes. The Gloria, we do the children's version of the Gloria so that they can participate more. Because the Gloria is hard, even for adults, to remember all the words and then a melody on top of it. So that, incorporating things that they can do, something that's on their level, so that they're fully participating and not just trying to keep up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm so glad you answered that. Now I know with those hand motions.
Hallelujah.
Yeah. And wow. I'm so glad I asked. So you brought that to the liturgy for the school Mass.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense because ever since I've seen a school Mass, that has always been part of it, from my experience anyway. Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, using music, the power of music, help kids learn about liturgy and their own faith is amazing. And you teach the music course over there for all the grades. I think. What's it like incorporating some of those lessons in the classroom, not just at Mass, but in the classroom too?
It's sometimes difficult, I will say, because I don't want to bog them down too much. I still want them to get the full experience, especially, I don't think it's so much of a assumption anymore, but when I was growing up, it was, you know, you went to Catholic school, you got a good Catholic part of your education, but everything else was kind of not as good as public school, especially the specialist areas like music, art, gym. Back then we didn't have STEM, but at least I had computer class. And, and seeing that actually happen, my husband, who went to Catholic school, K through 8th, didn't have any specials. His primary teacher did everything, which that must have been so much work. But now, especially then being in a couple schools, knowing other music teachers in the Catholic school system, that's not the case. If you send your child to a Catholic school, they're getting a very full, rounded education in everything. They're not lacking anywhere. And then the additional fact that they are delving more deeply into their faith on top of that is an added, and obviously most important part, but an added bonus in a sense. I think that's forgotten. And incorporating, the liturgy and the music that we sing at school mass into my lessons with the little kids, it's just getting them used to the routine. We always sing this and this is why, or we're singing this one because it's this feast day, or the reading says this. The older kids, we really think more about the lyrics that we're singing. Now that they know the songs for the most part, it's, well, what does this mean? And I do a couple lessons where we don't even listen to the song first. We read the lyrics out loud, just speaking them. And we, point out what stands out to you and what might confuse you, and, well, how can we get that confusion to lessen or even understand it more? And that really helps them really realize that it's not just a song, it's part of the liturgy, it's part of, the celebration of Mass and whatever the readings or the feast day happens to be when we're in school.
Yeah, and in the classroom, I was one of those kids that really didn't take music class seriously. I wish I did. Does that, when you get kids like that, does that burn you out at all? How do you cope with that? And how do you minister that kid that is like, I don't want anything to do with this. I don't care about faith. I don't care about music, because it happens a lot probably.
Actually, not as much as I guess you would say. I mean, I'm
just abnormal.
I don't want to say anything, maybe, but I don't know. I mean, yeah, I would say the older a kid gets, and it tends more so to be the boys than the girls, the more they kind of get self-conscious about singing. And I maybe it has to do with the vocal change that they go through, and I get the voice cracking, and you don't want that to happen in front of your friends and classmates. But I think instilling the fact that you're singing because you need to fully participate in the Mass at the age of 5, kindergarten, and having that be a consistent theme keeps I'm not singing today, or I'm not participating because I'm cool and this is not cool type of thing from really taking foothold. I know that happens a lot with colleagues that I know in public schools. They struggle with 5th through 8th grade because it's not cool to do this or that, or that's a baby thing. But I think I avoid that because it's helpful. I mean, a lot of schools are not K through 8th, but because most of them have known me since kindergarten, they know my expectations, they understand why they're supposed to do it and why it's important, and that kind of keeps the I'm too cool for this attitude from kind of sinking in too much. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, because it does.
I could think of a couple kids that I taught over there were probably like that, but
yeah, but I mean,
I should have known, because I came from public school, but honestly, most of the kids over there are pretty respectful to the teachers, definitely. And they care.
Yes, that's true. But I think, I know music's my favorite thing, but I get that everyone's different, and it's not everybody's favorite, so I'm not gonna shove it down your throat that you have to do this because I like it. So I kind of, we have that discussion sometimes. Well, they ask me, why are we learning this? And I explain to them, I'm teaching you things about music, not always related to liturgy, but just in general, because you want to be a well-rounded person. To be able to sit and listen to a song and appreciate not just the fact that you like it, but what do you like about it? What do you hear? How do you describe it?
Yeah.
I see a lot of adults that didn't have that type of, I guess, education, kind of not be able to connect to music as much. And for an example, I guess, 8th grade had a pretty difficult assignment that we did. Gustav Holst wrote a suite called The Planets, and they're different smaller pieces of music put together to represent not the planet in space, but the god, the Roman or Greek god that is the name of that planet. And I kind of related it to, the theme music for like Star Wars and Marvel and all of that, and how each character seems to have a theme song. So we went through, we listened to an excerpt of each, and they really had to listen. They had to listen for all the different musical elements and be pretty thorough with it. And I just actually the other day went through, with average expectations, but looking through what they wrote and how they responded, I was really blown away. I did not expect them to really hear as much and understand as much as they did. But then I'm sitting back, this year's 8th grade was in 1st grade when I started. So I've had them for 7 years, and being able to see their progression and the fact that what I've taught them, they actually latched onto and applied is just,
Oh, that's
that's
beautiful.
the
Yeah.
rewarding part. Whether or not
You see the fruit of it.
right, whether or not music's their favorite subject, which I get, it's not everybody's favorite subject. But the fact that they can take what I taught them and apply it, and I know that it'll stick with them, is the more important part than whether or not they like everything that we do.
For sure. Yeah, and honestly, tying music to worship or music to liturgy wasn't really ingrained in my head, like the power of it, until I went to Steubenville,
Okay.
Ohio, for their conference. Have you ever been there?
No.
Heard of it? So like they have this huge stage. They have like adoration up on it, and they bring in a whole band and they do praise and worship with adoration. And my first experience of that was like when I was the end of college area, and they had an adult conference out there in Ohio, and that moment in adoration when all that music was playing, I understood like, wow, tying music to this, because I've been to adoration before where it's just kind of, you're sitting there, which is beautiful in its
Yes.
own right.
And important.
It's important, right? The silence is important. But it was just a different experience with the music tied to it. And I wanted to hear your take on what is the magic behind like tying the music. I mean, it's a dumb question, but like there's a beauty to people who are in music ministry that can enhance someone's experience through this. Like, they can go deeper in prayer because they're hearing this music playing.
I think it really has a lot to do with whether or not the person that's either listening or maybe in the congregation singing, whether or not they're opening themselves up to actually taking the song in. There's a difference between opening the hymnal and just singing along because it's what you're supposed to do, and actually opening the hymnal, looking at what we're singing, and then trying, to put yourself in a place where you're not just singing because you're supposed to, but you're connecting it to the readings, to the homily. One time, I think it was a school mass, and I think it was Father Brennan, who just retired from Our Lady of the Rosary. I think he was presiding over mass, and it was St. Teresa Lisieux, the Little Flower. I had prepared, the call to worship and the intercessions, based off of her feast day. Wasn't wasn't really in the actual readings for the mass, but it was her feast day, and I thought in my head that would be important to bring up in the call to worship, and then insert it into the intercessions, and then some of the songs kind of connect not just to the readings but to her. And then for those that don't know, I don't have, I don't have the chance to sit down with the priests to work everything out. I
Wouldn't that be a luxury?
Yeah, oh my gosh, it'd be amazing. I do the school side, they do their side with the homily and making sure they know the gospel reading for the day and everything like that.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's kind of separate in a way, it's, two people thinking about it, two different people thinking about it from different perspectives, and then connecting it together. There was a huge overlap between what I wrote in the call to worship and one of the parts of the intercession where we mentioned St. Teresa de Lisieux, and what Father Brennan had put in his homily. And I'm sitting there listening to his homily, and I'm like, it's amazing that, when people that are different sit down, and obviously, with all of his experience as a priest, and then me with my experience, not limited experience, but compared to Father Brennan, time-wise, lack of experience, that we kind of came to the same idea of the, emphasizing, being grateful and taking the time to appreciate the little things, because that's what she did. And just have that happen is just sometimes shocking. Even though when you really sit back and think about it, okay, you're like, okay, that kind of makes sense. But that, I think, when that clicks between what I was thinking about and what the priest says in their homily, it makes me feel more confident in how I'm reading and interpreting things. And I think if, the people in the congregation take the time to look at the readings and outside of Mass, just let it sit, let it, think about it. And then sometimes when I'm looking at the readings like that, a line sticks out, and a song that I know, just connects, and I'm like, okay, well, I have to use that one. Sometimes it's really difficult, especially because we have daily Mass readings. It's not the Sunday Mass readings. So a lot of the songs that are written by, people that write for OCP and Spirit and Song and Breaking Bread and all that, they're written based on the Sunday readings. When you get a reading for a Friday Mass or whatever day of the week it is, you're not always going to find a song that's going to nicely connect. So really taking that time to find the connection and then show it to the students and have them realize, okay, I can see where this kind of relates to that and why we're doing this and why we're doing that. That, I think, really sticks out.
That is true, because when I get the songs from Austin to put in the bulletin, I mean, he works hard to tie it in to.
Austin does a great job with the music and tying it to the readings. I mean, I've been to lots of different churches, and some of it I see the same level of connecting like that Austin does.
Yeah.
Some I'm just like, okay, it's Advent, so we're singing this song because it's Advent, not just because, not because it's actually, kind of stand out in a reading in the Mass, but because it's a liturgical season, or because, we sing it all the time. I see that sometimes, and I think that puts people off. I think that doesn't get them to want to sing or understand or sit there and kind of reflect on it as much as if you actually put the effort in to make the connection.
Yeah, and sometimes when I'm praying with music in the background from either at Mass or at adoration, sometimes the song lyrics become the prayer.
Yes.
Maybe that's the secret sauce, if there is one. I mean, for me, I can actually use, when I hear it, I can be like, all right, this connects to what I'm actually thinking right now. And I use those lyrics as my prayer, and then I get very visual. It helps me, it leads me into a deeper way of praying that I think without the music, I wouldn't have gotten there. But I mean, who knows? I mean, being just in silence, thinking about nothing sometimes is the prayer, right?
That is true. Yeah.
Sometimes that is the prayer at that time, but something about some of these lyrics that ties into what I'm thinking about at that time, it makes it tie together really nicely.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think people like you make that happen. I mean, that's
I try.
it's really cool. I mean, I have to get Austin on the show to talk about some of the stuff he does for Mass.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
because he works a lot. I mean, some people think, oh, the music person just comes on a Sunday and just wings it. I mean, I was shocked at
way.
how much planning goes
Oh,
into
yeah.
some of this stuff.
I know. I was shocked when I started teaching, and I only have to plan one Mass a month, but to plan, every weekend is a lot of time.
Yeah, on top of that, you deal with teens and kids singing, so it's probably hard. And then he has to, he deals with adult
Right,
sometimes.
and it's a different mindset.
Yeah.
When Austin picks a song and we sing it at the 11 o'clock, I try to think, could the kids latch on to this? I mean, sometimes it's musically too difficult, and you have to really remind yourself of that. Okay, yes, I'm preparing the music liturgy, but I have to keep in mind who's going to be sitting in the pews.
Yeah.
And for me, it's kids. And so, I want to make sure the melodies are catchy and simple, and also higher in the voice, as opposed to
point.
the adults, where you want to keep it, within, it's not going to stand out to everybody, but, a C major scale, a D major scale. But kids, you want the F major scale, you want a G major scale. You want them to sing up high in their range, because if they don't learn to sing high in their range when they're an adult, they're not going to have it. You have to make sure that they have that, in their ear and their voice at a young age.
So they don't lose it later.
Yeah. So they don't lose it later, because it's
I've
hard to
never
develop
even
later.
Thought about. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know, like, we sang Emmanuel today in F. And on Sunday, when we sang it at the 11 o'clock, it was in D. So there's an example. It's lower because adults are the main people in the pews. Kids can sing, obviously, in D. It's not hard. But, today we sang it in F because the majority of people at the 9:30 Mass were kids.
Maybe that ties into the different feel of a school Mass versus a regular Mass. I mean, it always just feels different. And
yes.
You can say it's because there's a bunch of kids in the room, but it's honestly like the whole environment, like the way the homily is tailored towards them. And then the music is, I didn't know that. The music is tailored to them.
Yes.
Wow.
And the way I play. Austin can get fancy. I can't, because then there's too much for them to try to latch onto, and they need that melody to be really pronounced.
The detail of these things is amazing. Wow. Yeah, that's why, though. It just feels like a totally different Mass. And then, again, you have to tailor in, like, 7 o'clock or 5 o'clock at night for Saturday night is way different than 11 o'clock on a Sunday.
Definitely.
And even the 9 and 11, they're different crowds.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't know if it's because of the way things are formatted, and it's not just here. It's in a lot of different parishes, but it seems like the earlier Masses, the more traditional, and the later in the day Masses are the ones that are more contemporary. And then Saturday is just, I think it really depends on where you're at. Saturday here versus Saturday at Our Lady of the Rosary, where I play, and it's just, everywhere is kind of different. Saturday is an anomaly. It's interesting.
And on Sunday here, we go from 7 a.m. no music to 11 a.m. with drums and guitar and bass. It's kind of funny.
I know.
Wow.
You have something for everyone.
Yeah. And I get the luxury of seeing it all. Like, I'm here from the 7 into the 11, and just seeing the different flavors of music is amazing. Cool. Well, this is a cool discussion. I mean, we didn't really plan to go down that road, but honestly, it's cool. I know nothing about technical music, so when you started saying D, G, and all that stuff, I completely forgot about that from school. So thanks for bringing that back.
No problem.
Cool. I mean, so as we kind of get closer to the end of the podcast, I mean, what are some lessons learned from people that kind of just passively listen to music, but you go on it from a technical level? What are some lessons people are missing when they're just kind of, oh, nice music,
I think they're just, yes, there's music, and mainly pop music, where it's just fun music, and it's very surface. There's not a lot of, meaning behind the lyrics. There's not a lot of musical talent.
No talent required.
Well, not no talent, because obviously if you're singing off pitch, you're singing off pitch.
I mean, there's always auto-tune, right?
True, but that can only do so much. So, I mean, it really depends on what you're listening to. If you're, one of the people that music's not a huge priority for you, that's fine. But you should really kind of try to put more thought into the music you're singing during mass, as opposed to popping on the radio and just, bouncing around in your car to whatever it is, Taylor Swift. I don't know. But
is that what you do?
No, no offense to Taylor Swift, but no. So I think people like music on different levels, and if you're really truly into music, your Spotify list or your I don't know, iTunes, whatever you're using, is probably like all over the place with what you're listening to. And I suggest that you search or take a look at some of the music we sing during mass, especially the 11 o'clock. It's on the radio. It's popular.
Yeah.
You can go see these
like Matt
musicians.
Maher stuff.
Oh my, yeah, Matt Maher is huge. But like even some of the other songs, like, and there's new and young artists that are really putting a lot of time and effort into what they're creating, and to have that be appreciated, I think, is important. And it's not all organ, traditional singing, kind of on the classical side. There's something for everyone. There's Christian rap, and it's good. It's not, cheesy. I mean, everybody assumes that if you put God's lyrics into things that you don't sing during mass, it's going to be hokey, but it's not. There's artists out there that are devoted Christians that really think it's important to put that message into their lyrics. Heavy metal, rock, rap, country, it's all over the place. And I suggest that if you like, even pop music, there's pop music out there that's Christian, that's excellent. And it doesn't get as much playing time because it is Christian, because it's, niche. It's, some people get offended by it, and that kind of gets left out, part of, that, I don't want to say cancel culture in the same sense of everything else, but it's not looked at as much as secular music. But it's really changed my mind on a lot of Christian music that I had the same kind of idea. Oh, it's going to be hokey, it's going to be cheesy, it's there's not going to be a lot to it. But if you really actually sit and listen to some of these artists, you really do get like, wow, they really made that connection there. Or what does this mean? I'm going to go find the passage in the Bible. Like it really puts a lot of more attention to the things that you've maybe heard before or maybe haven't. If you're not a person that opens the Bible very often, you just rely on Sunday mass readings. It really does make a connection, and at least for me, has me stop and think and make sure I understand. That makes sense.
Yeah, it's powerful. I mean, Abbey Fests. I went to that for the first time this year, and seeing all the kids, like, people always ask, where are the youth? Why aren't they in the pews? Well, go to one of these events. I mean, where there's music and all this other stuff, and you get a whole field of people, young people.
I mean, yes, we're in a time of entertainment.
Yeah,
kids want to be entertained, and that's not really what's going to happen at mass. That's something you have to teach them, instill into them the importance of why we're more subdued, I would say. But that's not all there is in the Catholic faith. There's so much that is entertaining, but at the same time still true to what the message is.
Yeah, what I like about Abbey Fest is they integrated both. So what they did was they had like a praise and worship concert, basically, and then they bled it into mass. Like, it was amazing to see how they did that. And Archbishop Sherez even, he was like, all right, who's out here below the age of 30? And then he had everyone stand up, and majority of people. And he even got people to come up, like kids to come up and be like, are they hearing the call to the priesthood? Are they hearing the call to become a religious sister? And it was beautiful to see. I mean, tying all that in. And they even brought in artists that weren't Catholic, which is awesome. Matt Maher was there. He was sort of like the
focal point.
Yeah, the focal point of the night, I guess.
Yeah.
But even that, he did all of his songs, and then they did adoration right after that. And he kind of led the praise and worship at adoration. So whatever they're doing, it's awesome, and music is a huge part of it.
Yes.
Same with Steubenville. I mean, the music is a huge part of that experience, and we're so blessed to have talented musicians that are dedicated in their faith, but also dedicated to the technical side of planning liturgy, planning music, and all of that stuff. So thank you for your service to this church, for PJP, but really to all the folks that are in your position, that put in the long hours to
Yeah, I appreciate
make
it.
the experience awesome for people like me that have no idea what it takes.
Yes, I would have never, 15 years ago, never expected to be here, in my job, my career, my faith, anything. And I mean, honestly, you don't really understand what is being done outside of the Mass until you are called to do something outside of the Mass to plan for Mass.
Oh yeah, that's truth, right? Because now you're the person that everyone is looking to like, all right, here, where's the next cue?
And you
right?
think you know the Mass because you go every week, but then when you actually have to be in charge, you're like, wait a minute, what do we do next?
Yeah, because a lot of times
happening?
when there's music, the priest actually relies on the person leading music to go to the next part, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of a give and take. Keep an eye on the priest.
Yeah,
kind of
don't get ahead of each other,
right? Yeah, and obviously they're in charge, so you're kind of the support. I want to say, you play until they're ready. That's what I like
noticed.
to say.
I noticed Father Fitzpatrick. He sometimes waits a little bit, and then the music goes, and then they go to the next part. So
silence
that's
is
a lot of
important
pressure.
too.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure, though.
Yeah. Well, in the beginning, I think once you get used to it, you kind of don't even think about that anymore. But it's good when you have a relationship with the priest. If it's someone brand new, that's when it's like, okay, what's he going to do, or what does he expect me to do? But to know and go through Mass, and even outside of Mass, talk to whoever was presiding that day for school Mass, especially, is helpful with kind of feeding off each other and kind of being able to tell, the timing of things.
So today was Father Juan. Have you ever celebrated Mass with him before?
Yes. Well, he's at Our Lady of the Rosary now.
Okay, yeah.
And I've been playing there for 4 years, maybe? I want to say 4.
So you're used to how he does it.
I'm getting used to how he does it. He's fairly new. He started
this past summer, right?
Yes.
He's brand new.
So, and he's brand new priest. So he's new, and then new to, the church, and kind of trying to find that balance of, okay, we've always done this, but then he, has his own ideas, and kind of trying to make sure that they're still balanced and he's not changing too much and at all at the same time, but also, putting in his input then on things that he's important, and kind of getting used to how he's different than Father Brennan, who I played for every weekend for 4 years. And so every priest, even though the Mass is the same, I mean, everything's, slightly different depending on how long they take to do something, or how quickly they read this, or how long their homily is, or things like that. It's a lot of getting used to and playing and being around whoever's presiding at Mass consistently.
Awesome. Good. Well, thank you for coming onto the podcast, sharing a little bit of your story, and also walking us down this technical road that is music. Honestly, it's an art, but it's also kind of like a science in a way. I mean, like, my gosh, I don't know. I don't know how people do it, but there's living proof that people can do it. So thank you so much for your service in the church, in the school, and hope to have you on again at some point.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Have a good one.
You too.